What do you get when you mix the top brands in sim racing with thousands of passionate sim racers from around the world? Simgaming Expo 2025, the inaugural North American trade show. But for me, this event turned out to be about something even bigger than the gear. Normally when I go to a show like this, my mission is clear. Walk the floor, go to every booth, and bring you guys in-depth footage of every piece of gear at the expo. But this expo is different for me. Every 5 feet I'd bump into another Simpit community member, and in those moments, the reviews, the gear, even the schedule, none of that mattered. What mattered was giving them my time. I wanted to show them that I'm the same guy you see here on the show, so I flipped it around on them. Instead of them asking me questions, I was asking them, how long have you been sim racing? What kind of gear do you run? Or what do you just love about sim racing? And honestly, that ended up being the best part of the entire weekend, seeing their passion for sim racing, just like mine. It reminded me of what this community is really about, that passion, that connection. It's what made this show so special. And it wasn't just the fans. This expo felt like a family reunion. I finally got to meet Matt Malone face to face, and we geeked out about sim racing like we'd known each other forever. I hung out with Lawrence DeSosa and Mike from Sim Racing 604 and the entire iRacing Lounge podcast crew. And each morning turned into a virtual breakfast with Mike from Sim Racing Den and the entire Chicane podcast crew. These guys were all a blast to hang out with. And somewhere in between, we even hopped on the Into the Apex podcast for a fun interview. These creators, these media outlets, they each tell their own unique story of sim racing in their own way. But at this show, it felt like we were all part of one collective story about where sim racing is headed. Now, of course, I didn't spend all my time with fans and creators. I did get my hands on some gear as well, and at this show you had everything. You had PXN and Turtle Beach offering some great entry-level setups, and honestly, both of them impressed me. I'm looking forward to getting them into the studio and seeing how they hold up. Then you had the heavy hitters. SimuCube was showing off their monster direct drive bases, their infamous active pedal, and now a new pedal that can swap roles between throttle and clutch. And then SimLab. They had their tried and true premium rigs holding down the high-end section. And I was lucky enough to jump into some serious motion. The VeroSim 6 Degrees of Freedom was smooth, compact, and really convincing, especially for a system that actually fits in a normal-sized room. Racing Fuels rigs really stood out too. They weren't just another profile build. They looked and felt like real race cars. You could start with that base sim and then scale it up to traction loss or even full motion depending on your budget. But my personal highlight, the Simcraft Apex 6. I drove one of their rigs years ago, but this version, it's on another level. More degrees of motion, insanely responsive tuning, and one of the most convincing sim drives I've ever had. I ran a car and track combo that I've done in real life, and it felt like reliving it. That's how dialed in this thing was. Now, I couldn't hit everything, and there are 2 rigs that I really regret missing. First, you have the Driven Dynamics Spider in the Fanatic Corsair booth. People were raving about it all weekend long. And then there was the Apav 6 actuator rig in the SimuCube booth. You can think of both of these like a mini Dallara or Cruden Sim. Both are high on my list to cover or drive in the future. And honestly, beyond rigs, it felt like there are wheels everywhere. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there were more than 100 different rims on display. Which brings me one of the coolest parts of the expo, that being product launches. It wasn't just about showing off, it was about dropping new gear. Gomez Sim Industries was showing off their new interlock system. A $700 rim that brings the same quality that we know, but a much more affordable price point. Cube controls surprised me as well, with the Astra rim. It's a proper high-end design, but coming in at only $400 or $500 depending on the model, that's wild. Husingveld was also turning heads with their first ever wheel, the Husingveld 1, a purpose-built, no gimmicks wireless wheel rim coming in at only about $600. I think a lot of racers are going to be tempted by this one. And then there was the VPG. We saw their Mustang rim last year, and we saw it at the show here on a rig as well. But now it's Porsche's turn. Their new 911 Cup Car wheel. It's so authentic, I don't even want to call it a replica. It's the real deal in sim form. And yes, there's already one on the way to the Simpit. I can't wait to test this baby out. But one of my biggest surprises came from SimLab. Everyone knows them for their rigs, but this time they unveiled a wheelbase. And it wasn't just another direct drive motor. This was the smoothest, least cogging wheel I've ever touched. Driving it felt incredible. And yeah, I'll definitely be wanting to get one of these into the studio soon. Another really fun part of the weekend for me was getting up on the stage and talking about the history of sim racing. Amir did the heavy lifting. He had all the dates, all the titles, all the videos queued up. I was just kind of there for the color commentary and to tie it all together. We broke it down into 4 sections, from the early days of floppy disks and steering wheels clamped to desks, all the way to full motion monsters that we were surrounded by there at the expo. The reaction from the crowd was awesome. You had some old guys like me who were nodding along, remembering the way it was, and then you had the younger guys laughing at us for how primitive it was back in the day. And that's what it was about, that mix of nostalgia and excitement for the future. That is what sim racing's all about. And then something happened that I'll never forget. Amir and Bill had been planning something behind my back. So while we were wrapping up our final segment of the history of sim racing, Bill comes walking on stage with a computer to surprise me, to honor me. Built PCs was now going to be sponsoring the show, and they wanted to take me from the dark ages, because quite honestly, it's been a rough ride recently with a really limping along computer, and I get laughed at, and they are going to be giving me a brand new PC right here on stage. It started with Bill giving a really heartfelt speech, and I did my best to respond, but honestly, I was pretty overwhelmed. To be recognized like that, in front of so many fans and friends for all the time and passion I put into this hobby. It was one of the most touching moments of my career, and it's not just a one-time gift. This is the start of an ongoing partnership with Built PCs, which means we're going to be able to keep pushing the limits together. At the end of the day, this show reminded me what it's all about. It's not just the gear, it's not just the racing, it's the people, it's the community. That is the heart of sim racing. I want to give a huge thank you to Jorge Anzaldo, his entire family, and his entire crew for putting this show together. They did a fantastic job, and they gave me one of the most rewarding experiences of my sim racing career.
Maybe one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. The amount of people who come up and shared with me their stories of how somehow I affected their sim racing journey or even getting into it.
I want to thank everybody who came up and said hello. You might not realize it, but those moments have a lasting memory on my love for sim racing and doing this job. I want to thank all the exhibitors for putting on a great show. They brought us their best, let us test it out, and kept us well entertained. And I want to thank everybody who attended. You made year one an over-the-top success, a great building block for the future, and I'm already excited about the next one. So I hope you enjoyed our coverage of Simgaming Expo 2025. I do apologize that we are a little bit light on content. It didn't quite go as planned, but hopefully we're going to get a lot of the items that we saw at the show here on the show so you can see it soon. This is the Simpit. I'm Shaun Cole, and I'll see you on the track. guys like me who are kind of nodding along, reminiscing the way it thing at how primitive it was back in the day. Kind of laughing at how primitive. Kind of laughing at how primitive. It's not that hard. Laughing at us for how primitive. Who are literally laughing at how primitive. All right, remembering the way it was, and then you had to look. Now you can't even get that far. Primitive it was back in the day. That's the beauty of what was going on.